This is Decentralized Radio. I'm Tristan.
And I'm Ryan.
The goal of this podcast is to help educate you on how to live your most optimal life. We will host industry expert guests to shed light on topics that matter.
We are not gurus, rather two individuals who have had to pave their own path to health and vitality, independent of the centralized systems that plague modern society.
Today I'm talking with Ben Justman, in person in beautiful Paonia, Colorado. Ben is a natural winemaker and a Bitcoiner. We talked a lot about his journey into winemaking and how he also got into Bitcoin and why he has such a high conviction for Bitcoin and the community around wine. It was a really fascinating and fun conversation with a friend of mine. Excited for you to listen.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Decentralized Radio. We're here live in Paonia, Colorado with Ben Justman. Ben, how's it going, man?
Hey, Tristan. Great to see you, man. Fun to have you out.
Yeah, we've had some issues. This is my first in-person podcast I've done by myself. First podcast without co-host Ryan, so it's taken a minute to get set up. But
Ryan, I know why he needs you.
This is why we need Ryan. But no, it's great to do this kind of on a mini road trip here through the Mountain West. But Paonia is a pretty beautiful place to live. So you grew up here. You make wine, all natural wine, and you're big into Bitcoin. So why don't we start off with the wine story? How did you get into wine? Your dad grew wine. You kind of learned the ropes, but it's also big in this community. So how did you really want or find out that you wanted to dive into making wine? Because it's a pretty unique thing to do.
To do the wine story properly, it's kind of my life backstory. My dad wanted to always retire to a farm and grow all his own food. So when I was 8, we moved from Austin, Texas, where he was designing and building homes, to Paonia, a town of 2,000 people that, especially at that time, was a coal mining, ranching, and farming town. So quite a big shift. Grew up here on the farm, worked every summer, and then left and never thought I'd move back here until I was older. But then I studied geology, traveled, ski bummed, and kind of realized that I wanted to have my own business. And my dad had been growing grapes for a long time and making wine, and nothing like he was a huge wine business guy or anything, and was just kind of making it naturally, no additives, letting the wine make itself. And as I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, it just kind of hit me on a call with him that I could just make wine and kind of take over what he was doing. So he was just making enough wine for himself, pretty minimal infrastructure, but enough to get started with at least. And so in 2019, I got that idea in the spring, got all the paperwork done to get a liquor license. And then in that fall, I made wine, and I'd never made wine before. So had a lot to learn, and definitely read a ton of books before that, but it's really, I'm a hands-on learner, and just figured I'd learn from my dad how to make wine. And pretty much like came back, started making wine. He told me the basics of it, but pretty quickly I learned that he didn't really know what he was doing either. So gave me two feelings. One, all right, you're in this on your own. And two, wow, he made really good wine not knowing what he was doing. I can figure this out. And the key to figuring it out with natural wine is kind of just being hands off and letting the grapes do their thing. I mean, I don't add anything to the grapes. All I do is act as a shepherd and like physically move the grapes during different stages of the process into different places, different containers. And that leaves you with like a really high quality wine with minimal intervention. So yeah, there's nothing to the wine except for the grapes at this point.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool about it, I think, and we'll dive more into like the nuances of organic and natural wines. But I'm curious, so you graduated college, did you have like a real fiat job first and then kind of like dove into this, or you're kind of in between stages? Like what was that? Like dive into that moment a little bit.
So my life goal always was go to college, ski bum, travel. and then figure out what I wanted to do after that. And that was super open ended, but that was the fourth part. And so after living in Vietnam for a year, I just kind of got really bored, honestly. And so when you get bored, you start searching for things, and started gravitating towards entrepreneurialism. I moved back to Vietnam and started a like t-shirt company that was very much side hustle. I think I sold 3 shirts, but I learned a lot. I learned that I didn't want to work online. And then I got a geology job. I was drawing geologic maps by hand, and there was some good about it. I wasn't on the computer all the time, which was nice, but I never got to go outside, and it was pretty mind numbing. So I started another sticker company with a buddy who's a graphic designer. Then we got sidetracked, didn't go anywhere. But I kind of knew that this was like where my energy wanted to go. And so after a year of working as a geologist, not making any real money or anything, I was kind of looking for something to dive into. Like, I don't want to go get another job. I want to start something, but like, what is it? And I want it to be big, and I want to commit. Like, I'm really just looking for something to commit to. And weirdly enough, like, yeah, my backstory, my dad made wine, all that stuff, but like, I'd never made wine before, and weirdly, starting a winery was the low hanging fruit for me.
Yeah, just given the situation and everything. And yeah, I think that's important because a lot of people that jump into this entrepreneurial space, there's always different paths, but you have the people who are kind of just like hustling, side hustles all the time through college, and they get out and just keep doing that. But the real problem is that people get stuck in like a corporate job for like many years. But I feel like yours was pretty short lived, so you're kind of almost looking for that like right away. Is that like how you had the mindset, or kind of
Not totally. Like, I loved studying geology in college. It was like, the school I went to, we take one class at a time for 3.5 weeks. It was on the block plan, and then we go to our next class. So between each class, you get 4.5 days. You just go camping. But during the classes, I would go out into the field for a week or two. Like, I would spend half of my college life camping for school.
that's
And out in the
badass?
box. Like, it was amazing. I was going to be a physics major, and doing a couple classes like deep in these dark physics rooms, and then I take one geology class with my best friend, and I was just like, wait, we can go camping for school. I'm going to study this. And so that was amazing. Then I got into the actual like geology world, and I realized that it was not as like, it wasn't going to be like school. So the first year, or maybe not quite the first year of having that job, I was looking for another job in geology, and then kind of just realized that there wasn't a career path for me, and learning more about myself. I'm like 24, 25 at that point. Just realizing that I needed something more entrepreneurial to feel fulfilled. And like I said, I was doing those side hustles that I was putting a lot of energy into. They just didn't go anywhere. My heart wasn't in them. And that's kind of where I knew I wanted something big that I could commit to. So
Yeah, that's cool. And it's like we talked about on a previous podcast with Stephen Arena, aka Tan Man, and he talked about like entrepreneurship and trying, like, even if you know it's not going to be like a smashing success, like shipping things, like we were talking about earlier, like, it's a pain in the ass, and you kind of understand what it takes to like get a product out there, or just try marketing or graphic design. Like, there's a lot that goes into a business that I think people don't realize, especially if you're like a one man show like you are, which is awesome. But it's good to try out some side hustles just to get your toes in the water. But I want to tap into maybe like, yeah, the outdoors. That's, well, first off, that's sick that you're in the outdoors camping so much in college. Like, that's something for me that was totally disconnected, and something I did when I was younger. Lost it in high school, not in college, and then end of college, kind of when I was in Portland, Oregon, reinvigorated my love for the outdoors. Is that something you were raised just like outside, in nature all the time, and you just had that principle instilled in you, and still to this day do value very heavily?
well, I mean, I grew up on this farm, right? And also with friends in Paonia. What's there to do in Paonia? You just go into the woods. So I grew up outside. I grew up doing like hanging out all the time outside. I mean, honestly, like, yeah, I wanted to be inside playing video games, but my parents did their best to keep that to a minimum. Um, so yeah, I grew up outside. I grew up, I mean, obviously doing a ton of sports, but I grew up skiing a ton. And so that was kind of big introduction to being outside all the time, doing backcountry skiing, started when I was 14, and then got to college and found my ski crew, did so much backcountry skiing. The school the school had so much money floating around that they gave us money to go on a couple ski trips up to Canada and just quote unquote study snow science, but we just skied. So yeah, I've always been outside a ton and kind of really found my love for it in college because it was just kind of something that like I guess I did in high school. Like I loved to go camping. That was just normal. I didn't really think about it too much. But then my life started really revolving around being outside in college. And after working in an office for a couple years,
Was that in a big city or where was
I
that?
was in Denver.
Okay,
So
it was in.
yeah, so doing a little bit 20 minutes of commuting, but being inside all the time. And my first time ever like working in an office till 5 p.m. during the winter solstice and being like, oh, cool. So I never saw the sun today, which was pretty depressing. And so I felt it relatively viscerally. Like my health was horrible. Um, one of my best ski buddies, who's like strong, badass guy who had done a ton of amazing things with, like wanted, I was out skiing with him and I was like, no, I'm done, man. I can't keep going. And he was like, dude, something is wrong with you. Like you might maybe should go see a doctor. But I didn't think much of it. I was just, you're in it, you feel normal because it's your own normal. But in getting away from living in working in an office, moving back home, living on the land, and like working physically, being outside, and eating well again, all those things combined, realistically, like I do feel like like this is
Like you were sick.
but like I was sick. I was like dying back then. I was eating microwave because that was time for lunch. Just yeah, my body was like dying, and now I'm back here and I feel alive again. So
Hey, friend. Thanks for listening. If you really enjoy this podcast, it would be really appreciated if you left us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or subscribe to our content on YouTube. This helps us get to a larger reach and a larger audience to spread this wonderful free education.
Yeah, it's actually real. And I find that people who grew up like in a rural setting, like on a farm or just in nature, when they go to the cities, they feel it so much worse because they're just not like used to it, they're not adapted. And yeah, I mean, that's why I refuse to like work regularly in office because I know for a fact that like when I go in to an office or like at some conference or something like that, I just by the end of the day I'm just drained. Like I'm just stripped. Like it's 4 or 5 o'clock, and I just feel like so mentally drained. Whereas if I'm working from home, it could be the equivalent amount of work, but I'm like taking a break to go outside. Like I'm making my own meals, and I think it's a combination of just the artificial lighting. Like you're not getting any natural sunlight even through windows. We know it's not the same. You're just in like this high stress environment. You could argue about like EMFs and Wi-Fi. Obviously, it's like a way higher concentration of all these things in a city too. And then, yeah, if you're physically living in a city, I mean, who knows? Like, it's just completely alien to growing up on a farm out here, and it's absolutely beautiful out here. You should all come, visit one time in your life because it's the complete opposite of like a Denver or a big major city. So, and how long did it take you to kind of realize that or until that happened? Like a year?
well, I mean, the whole time I was searching for something different, and it was just a matter of finding it, finding the next thing to put my energy into. Like I would take a break in the workday to go on a walk outside and just like call someone and be like, what is going on? Like what, just kind of get my life together. Just so, I mean, as a lot of young guys especially do, is like, what am I doing with my life? Like what, I want to do something, but I don't know what it is. So yeah, I worked there for about a year, and then I spent about the next year getting ready for like starting the winery, but yeah, I got to wait till fall to actually make wine. So a lot of time, I mean, bureaucracy is like the biggest headache in my life. So I spent the next year like spending all my free time banging my head against the wall, metaphorically, to get the liquor license and everything. Um, and then I just was having enough with my job and was like, I can't do this for another year. So I spent 2 years at it, and then I knew I needed to wait another year because once I made wine, like I don't have anything to sell for a while. Cool, you started a winery. You don't have any wine yet. you got to wait 2 years. I guess my first time I waited a year and a half, but I had to figure out what I was going to do in that meantime. And my dad had this space on our property that was just like dying for a house. I mean, you're sitting in it right now. Like, it's a beautiful spot. And my dad designed and built houses his whole life. He's 75 now. He was 73 or so when we built it. It was just kind of one of those things like, I need to go build this house with my dad, and he wasn't going to do it unless the kid was with him, one of his kids. So yeah, I moved back to my tiny town of Paonia, which I never thought I would do, and built this house. But it helped a lot that it was like right during the height of COVID when I moved back, because then I had no FOMO leaving the city. It was just like, nah, this is the best life can be right now. So,
But was it still like a tough transition at first? I mean, I'm sure you had a lot of friends in Denver, and yeah, there's a lot going on, and it's easy to kind of.
But at the same time, like, people weren't hanging out, people weren't doing stuff, and here you had a lot more freedom. I mean, in Denver, you're just kind of stuck in the city, and then you go out to the mountains to de-stress, and then you drive back all on the same road, and you get stuck in traffic, and you're stressed just like you were when you left.
Yeah, it's I think the ploy of living in a city, and yeah, the traffic, especially to go skiing on 70 is like so bad. I'm curious, did you tell your parents about like feeling unwell in the city or anything like that? And were they, like, I told you so, or you should move back home, or were they happy when you moved back
I didn't
home?
understand what was going on.
Yeah.
I was just living, and I kind of knew something was wrong with me, but like, it wasn't this like visceral, oh my God, I'm stuck in the city. It was, I'm not happy right now, and I want to do something about it. And my version of do something about it was, start the winery, start building a house. So like, yeah, if you want to talk hard transitions, moving from office labor or work from home. And honestly, I just couldn't work from home. So I quit my job a couple months before I moved back here. And then I moved straight into hard labor, building a house. That's the hard transition. My body was not ready for that.
Yeah, but it's almost like the fulfillment like differences. I think it's like when you're in a corporate setting, you're kind of just like, what are you actually working for? Just like tangible things is not really there, and you're just part of some like big conglomerate or something like that. Whereas then you move home, and yeah, it's hard work, but you have this physical, tangible thing. You build a house, and then obviously you go into the wine and start your own business. Like, from a fulfillment perspective, that must have just been like through the roof after you guys finished
100%.
building a house.
I mean, like, during the whole time, I was just like walking around, like envisioning my future kids running around in this space. But there's only so much fulfillment that can power you when this floor is concrete, and we made this by carrying 80-pound sandbags up the stairs. Like, I wasn't thinking about my kids at that point. It's just hard work at a certain point. But yeah, you finish the day and you're like, I got one step closer to being in a house that I'm going to live in. Probably like for a lot of the rest of my life.
Yeah, and that's powerful, and it's just a sense of accomplishment. So that's awesome. How long did it take to build?
So my dad and Jorge, the guy who helped us build it, he actually helped build my parents' house 20 years ago. They cleared the land and poured the foundation for the garage, and then I got here, and I started working about June 1st and moved in about June 1st of the next year. The rest of the house wasn't done, but my one-bedroom apartment that's in the house was done, so I was able to move in. So about a year, and that whole time I was building the house and having the winery. So for, really 3 years I had 2 jobs, and the side hustle didn't make any money because I was waiting on the winery to actually have wine to sell.
So is that something you realize as well with the winery, like as you're getting into it, that like you needed to have this kind of like low time preference mindset to be successful? And did you have like goals in the beginning, or like things you were shooting for to achieve that you knew would take 3-5 years, or were you kind of just like, I think this could be successful, I know it's going to take a bit of work and there's going to be learnings, and we're just going to see where it goes?
I kind of just sent it. But I will say that I would think I was raised to have a low time preference growing up on the farm, and that's the way my mind works best. Um, and it's very healthy for me to be in a spot that's super low time preference. But it also was extremely important because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was able to have all that time to learn. So obviously the winemaking, you're thrown into the fire, and I got to figure out how to make the wine and everything. But like the process of running a business and thinking about like how I want to market or design things, all that stuff, I had a year and a half, 2, 3 years to think about before I ever had to execute. So I was given that time to really build this baseline and make sure I have a solid foundation for like the business aspect. And then all that needed was a good product.
Yeah, so you kind of had time to think about like the marketing and bringing the product to people in
Mhm.
that time. That makes sense. What were some of the like, the biggest hurdles or learnings that you had in those first couple of years? I know you're briefly telling me about the
Well,
one.
yeah, I had a bunch of wine go bad. So,
Yeah.
yeah, if you value that wine at what I sell it for today, that's like $70,000 of wine that went bad the first year. I don't really think about it. I have wine now, and the business is going well now, and I've figured things out. But yeah, so that first year, I'd never made wine before. I was not a big wine guy at all. I just grew up with a dad who had a vineyard and figured it out. But I, you know, I'm starting a winery and I don't know what I'm doing. Is this even good? Like, am I dedicating this life? And I'm about to spend so much more money on more grapes and do this again. So I'm in 2 years deep before I even know if I have product market fit, with no experience on a product that like most people think is insane education to be able to make. So like, yeah, I'm in my own head a ton. It was a very difficult time to have confidence because I had no proof. And I guess I'm someone who lives on proof. So I was opening up my barrels a lot for people that are knowledgeable to taste them because I wanted their feedback. I wanted, do I have good wine? Am I wasting my time? And opening up my barrels allowed a ton of oxygen and just oxygenated them. So not every one went bad. I mean, there's certain barrels that I guess I opened up more than others, so those got messed up. But all of all of my first wines won awards at the Colorado wine competition. So I guess I was doing something right. Like honestly, I was just happy they were drinkable. But the thing that really mattered was that they sold, and I was able to sell them. And so that first year, I sold wine.
And that was in 2021.
2021, I did farmers markets all summer. So the first farmers market, I'm like, I have no idea if people are going to buy this. Like, I'm just guessing on pricing and messing around, doing a ton of experimentation in how I deliver the sale, how I do tastings, how I price things, my stand. I'm just learning, just trying things. And so, yeah, I sold out that year, and that was really cool. But I didn't have that much wine. So I knew I had product market fit. I needed more product and I needed more sales avenues. So then the next year I had a lot more. Last year I had a lot more product and started out doing 5 farmers markets a week. That was insane. Like I thought I worked hard building a house, but every day is like a 12-hour day when you do a farmers market, and you're talking to people all day. You're doing tons of physical labor. You're standing all day, driving all day, like nonstop.
How was it like, the first people who bought your wine? Like, is there a credibility thing? Like, do they ask you, how long you've been doing this? Like, was there any like weird or kind of reserved interactions in that regard? Or were people like pretty stoked to try like a new, local
So on my original
wine?
bottle, I think with wine, experience, time, age, all that stuff is like a huge selling point. You don't really want something new. You want something aged. You want something tried and true. New stuff in wine is I mean, there's new trial stuff. Like there's definitely new exciting things, but I think wine has this general sense. Wine people have this general sense of wanting something that's old. And so on my first label, my logo was Peony Lane, established 2006. We planted the vineyard in '04. My dad made
From
his
your
first
dad,
wine
yeah,
in
yeah.
2006 under the name Peony Lane. And I wanted to graft off that time and be like, yeah, my dad's been making wine all this time. And a couple things. One, I realized that like that doesn't matter that much. And I can just tell the story. And two, everyone thought my wine was from 2006. They saw that date and just didn't connect it that the wine was from 2019. So it just caused some confusion, and you don't want people to think too much when you're trying to sell. So there's definitely some of that. Like, I think the first sale I did, the guy was like, "Oh, well, don't tell me I'm your first sale. Like, I'm the guinea pig," But it went well. Like I said, I mean, I got great feedback. I sold a bunch of wine, and it gave me a ton of confidence that for 2 years I'd invested both a hell of a lot of time and more than double what my peak net worth ever was into this. So like, I'd invested my life 2x over into this business that I had no idea if it was going to work. Like, even internally, I didn't know if my wine was good. I needed that market reaction, and I just never had it. So yeah, it was really hard, like, dedicating my life to something that I have no idea if it's going to work.
Yeah, and that was like 2 years, right? So like that's in 2021, and you already obviously had the 2019, the first year, and that's what you were selling. But you had already committed to the 2020 wine and bought all those grapes and barreled them.
And realistically committed to the 2021 because I got to place my order way before the grapes
selling season. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
So I placed my order in the spring. So I was basically 3 years deep in buying grapes before I had a single sale.
What gave you the confidence to keep going? Were you just like, this is, what I'm just going to go all in? Or is there any like, sliver of hope, or just based on your dad's, good wine?
Based off my dad's success, me thinking, oh, my dad can do it. Well, I can do it better than him. And there's this one guy, honestly, like this one guy, his name's Kevin. He gave me a ton of confidence because he randomly tried my dad's wine years ago, probably my dad's 2012 vintage, and didn't know my dad, just bought it at a liquor store and had been wanting to move out here and was just like, man, I just haven't had good wine from the area. I haven't had good Colorado wine. He randomly bought a bottle off the shelf of my dad's wine and liked it so much that he typed up like a full single space page letter to my dad about how great the wine was. And then he moved here.
He moved to Paonia
because of my dad's wine.
Wow.
And this guy's like, he's one level below Master Somm, which there's not many Master Somms in the world, Master Sommelier. So like, he knows wine. He's like very into natural wine. And so that letter, one, gave me a ton of confidence because I'm like, this guy is serious about wine and liked it that much. And also, I'd have him over and we'd do tastings. So I was telling you like about having people over, tasting my wine.
When you opened it up prematurely?
That was with him. Yeah.
Nice.
And so he'd never made wine. He's not going to tell me how to make wine, but tasting it with him and kind of being like, okay, cool. Yeah, this is solid. And having his influence, his voice in my ear saying, no, it's good, helped with the confidence. But still, I needed the product market fit.
Are you interested in 100% grass-fed, grass-finished bison meat? I'm excited to be a partner with Falls Family Ranches. Based in Wyoming, Falls Family Ranches is raising high-quality bison meat the way nature intended. As a native large ruminant of North America, bison is one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can consume. If you're interested in trying out their bison boxes, use code Tristan, Tristan, 10 for 10% off your first order.
And yeah, so it's almost like that $70,000 expense or whatever almost is worth it because you did get his feedback and confidence. I mean, who knows? You may have not.
We're here now.
You may have quit if you didn't have that, right? So,
well, no, I was so invested. Yeah.
Well, you never know what could happen, but it's such a low time preference, like 3 years of committing. And then, I mean, how did you feel after that summer when you like sold out? Like, was it just, you're like, this is the right path. Like, I'm doing this well. Now I know, and now I can be an even better winemaker. And you're just kind of like stoked for the future.
Yeah, you're like, cool. I know this works. First, that was like, okay, this works, but I didn't know how well exactly. And my confidence was still not quite there. I mean, I'm 1 year of selling out, not a ton of wine, So it was kind of, honestly, I moved to Telluride to ski bum and work in a restaurant and hope I could learn some more wine information and also just learn the service industry and just kind of see where that could fit in with my business. And we were doing a wine class with the sommelier of a Bordeaux tasting. And so I brought out my Cab Sauv, which is a common wine grown in Bordeaux, to add to that tasting. And the sommelier and everyone who worked at the restaurant, a lot of whom knew wine, I tasted a lot of good wine, were like, wait, that's actually really good. And the sommelier was like, yeah, I will bring me a case. I want to buy your wine and put it on the menu. And so I didn't have much wine. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, I have to sell it to you at just normal price. I sold it to them for like $25 a bottle. And so they mark it up 3x to 75. And so I'm waiting tables that winter selling my wine for $75 a bottle to these people. And that was what really gave me the confidence I mean, that's just like an insane amount of money at that time for me for a bottle of wine. I would have never spent $75 for a bottle, but these people were, and they were enjoying it. And I couldn't believe that.
And was the local factor, like, you think that helped with selling? Was there a lot of local Colorado wines on the menu there already, or no?
I was the only Colorado wine. So yeah, if people wanted Colorado wine, they get mine. A lot of people don't know Colorado wine exists. And there's not bad reason for that. I mean, it takes a long time to establish a winery. It takes, I mean, how long did it take me to get started? And the grapes were already grown. Like, if you plant a vineyard, you're not getting wine to sell for like 8 years. So then to have your first wine and then actually build credibility and notoriety for your wine, and not just your wine, but the area. I mean, you're talking 25 years for a first generation of that. And then you don't even know if you have the right grapes. So other people have to try different grapes. It just takes forever to get a wine region established for it to mean something. And so people are just finding out about Colorado wine, and that's real because it's been 50 years since the first grapes were planted in Western Colorado. So there are people figuring out Colorado wine, and there are a lot of people who just want to buy local stuff. I mean, that movement is insane these days. So a couple things working in both my and the other wineries' favors, that people want to try local wine. It's cool that it's the highest elevation. I'm growing in the highest elevation wine region in North America. So that it's its own unique effects on the wine, but also it's good. I mean, without that, it wouldn't be anything.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Obviously, the local movement is huge. We're big proponents of that. It's more decentralized. It makes more sense. Yeah, I guess getting into that, like, what makes it different? So in the wine here, and your wine specifically, and maybe talking a little bit about all natural wine. This, we talk a lot about health stuff on this podcast, as some people might be wondering why we're talking about wine, but a lot of people like to consume alcohol, even if they value their health. But I think, people like Ben Greenfield have talked about in the past, the benefit. People like to justify their vices to some degree. But I think what's most important is, if you're going to drink alcohol, you want to make sure it's pretty clean. And from my understanding, what you're doing is pretty much like the most all natural, clean wine you can get. So maybe shed some light on that and the elevation as well, how that affects the wine.
So when I think about drinking alcohol, because I hear you, like, I'm trying to run a business on my own. I can't drink all the time, but I have unlimited alcohol. And also I have to taste wine for a living. So I think about alcohol is it clean, first of all? Am I going to feel crappy the next day? And am I using this to enhance like a communal experience? Because there's something to alcohol making, I don't know, gatherings more connected. You drop some boundaries, whatever. Obviously, people have been using that forever. So natural wine there's no like hard set definition. There's generally a few things. One, it is made with wild yeast. So you don't add a yeast strain that's cured. I mean, they're all originally from vineyards, but they're grown in a lab, and you just add that to your wine, and it makes wine in this very specific way. You kill off everything else except for that, just so you know exactly what you're going to get. And you could probably say there's some stuff for health for that. I don't think it makes a huge difference, but the rest,
like saying there might be more beneficial bacteria.
Yeah, I can't totally speak to that. There's definitely more going on, and so a lot of people that want the wild fermentation. They are more focused on, you have to have good farming practices to be able to do that, because most yeast will turn wine to vinegar. And so, look, realistically, like, my dad's just been doing this for 15 years and it works because we farm and we don't add anything, we don't spray anything. Like, we just have a very healthy microbiome, and it ferments our wine well. So I don't ask that many questions about it. But if you do spray, like, not organic, you're probably going to get vinegar. You're going to get a crappy wine. So it's proof that your farming practices are good.
So it's like you're almost going like it's like all or nothing kind of like, it's like you kind of commit to being fully all natural, or like there's not a good like in between, which
No, I'd say there's gray area, because
Yeah.
with the wild yeast, sure, you got to farm really well. But a lot of and so what they would do if you're adding commercial yeast is you would kill off everything else by adding a ton of sulfur usually. So you could have added a bunch of sulfur. Mine has nothing added to it. And then you age it for, 1 to 2 to 3 years in barrel. And during that process, a lot of people add a lot of different stuff to it. And I have some winemakers come visit and they're like, "Oh, cool, you should add this to your wine." And I'm just like, no, I don't think so. I'd rather just not add anything because I can get good wine without any additives. And so it's this hands-off winemaking approach where it's let the wine do its thing, and don't try and have this like end result of, I want it to taste like this, so I'm going to add this to it. And so like I said, sulfites are the poster child because it's what people know, but there's a ton of different things you can add. I mean, there's stuff for taste, texture, color. I mean, literally anything you want to change in wine, there's something you can add to it. And so I don't have statistics for you. All I know is when I open a bottle of something that's just off the shelf, I legitimately kind of just feel horrible during and after. And I was always told this, a lot of people would say, "Oh, I can't drink red wine." They come over growing up with my dad, like, "I can't drink your wine. I get headaches from red wine." And my dad would just say, "No, try this." And they'd be fine. And they'd be amazed. And they'd be like, "I want more of your wine because I can actually drink it." And I was young, 25, 26, starting the winery. You don't feel horrible with hangovers. So I never had totally had a visceral experience with that. And then visiting some friends over the holidays, I bought $100 bottle of wine and was like, "This is awesome. I'm going to bring this over to my friends. Like, it's a special night. I'll bring over some of my wine too." And first of all, none of my friends wanted to drink anything other than my wine, which I thought was funny because I was like, "No, I balled out for you guys." But I started drinking that $100 wine because I was psyched on it. And I got a headache pretty quick. I never get that from wine because I mostly drink my wine, I guess. And all I did was I dumped it out. I poured a glass of my wine, didn't wait any time, just didn't have any water or anything. And my headache just went away. And like, I had been telling people you won't get headaches from my wine, but like, I'd never had a visceral experience of other wine giving me a headache. And then my wine, like, I don't want to say curing it, headache went away because I stopped drinking that other wine. And now I basically drink European wine outside of mine or someone else I know, just because it's visceral how horrible I feel drinking mass produced wine.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I think it goes with like the whole food system, like the additives are like the end of the ingredient list, and the wines, like, you don't even know what's really in there. I mean, and you don't know where these additives are derived from. I mean, a lot of these like crazy additives in foods and drinks are derived from like mold or some like weird source that is definitely not good for your health. And that's where you get like all these natural flavors and things. It's like, oh, well, that could mean like 1,000 different things with the FDA, or it doesn't make you list that out.
Mm.
And I think California is like the worst in terms of like that from a wine perspective. Is that why you're saying European wine is like probably better off? Or
I think it's more just cultural. Generally in Europe, it's illegal to like not be organic in certain parts of France, at least.
And organic means they're just not spraying the grapes.
Certain things, spraying with certain things.
Or spraying, yeah, because you can have organic
sprays.
sprays.
Mhm. Yeah. So it's their culture to be a little bit more hands off, whereas Americans are builders. We think generally humans make everything better. We can manipulate. We can make it better, and so that mindset goes into wine, and you taste. You know what you want to taste, and so you manipulate the wine to do that. And I get it from a business perspective, like you want to make sure you have a good product, but I think you lose a lot of the magic. And I mean, wine is so sensory. There's not like numbers or anything to say anything about like what's good wine. If you like it, it's good wine. And it's such a visceral thing that if you don't have the variability between years, you really lose a lot of the magic. And you take on a risk with that is like you may have a bad year. But if you don't have a bad year, it's really hard to have a great year.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to embody like life in general. Like people get so hyper fixated on like needing to control. It's almost like two ends of the spectrum, I guess, but they need to be like always, high input, high output, like type of life. And that's what we see with farming in general, right? That's like the whole industrial farming methodology, right? It's like high input, high output. When in terms of like regenerative agriculture, it's like low input, high output. So if you just kind of like let nature do its thing, I think people would be astounded at what you can get. And yeah, if you go to Europe, I mean, you go to like Italy or some things, and it's, for example, like you have a good piece of meat or something, like you only put maybe a little salt on this, and that's it, because you don't want to like ruin the flavor. Like you don't want to just cover it and all this stuff. It's like you want to taste it in its full, presence of what you're eating. And I think Americans are very disconnected from a lot of aspects of food, farming, I mean, just life in general. So that's interesting. But yeah, so you guys, you don't spray anything, you don't add anything at
We
all,
spray
right?
a sulfur compound that's organic, considered organic, 3 times a year to drive away what is known as powdery mildew. And that doesn't disrupt our microbiome. We're fine to go. It's really pretty minimal impact. It comes off in the rain. I guess like everything.
Do you think it's worth pursuing like a organic label? Is that a thing with wine as well? USDA organic? Or
Yeah,
is that just a whole? Because from what I've understood from just like food producers in general, I mean, it's obviously a big expense and cost and headache to do that. But do you think it's worth it? Is something you have in mind?
So it's something I think about, and a few things run through my head. One is that there's weirdly a like negative connotation for organic wine in the United States. I think a lot of that is like it just people consider it like barn wine. Someone's a farmer and they just happen to make wine, which in a lot of cases is just not good. I've had a lot of people be like, "Wow, your natural wine is actually good." I've had a lot of natural wine that tastes bad, and it's like that's real. If you're leaving it up to nature, you got to be pretty confident in how things go. So weirdly a negative connotation for some people. And if I'm doing that, if I'm paying money to be organic and going through all the bureaucratic nightmare, which like I said is like my personal hell, I better be able to raise my price because I'm already selling out. And when I think about wine pricing, I'm kind of already in this weird gray zone where if you're above $30, you might as well be $50. It's just how wine pricing seems to work. It's like if you buy a $30 bottle of wine, that's like a nice weekend. You're like, we're going to do a nice dinner tonight. $40, you get up to $50, you're like, oh, this is like a special night for us. And then like $100 anniversary and stuff. So like you want to fill those reasons why people buy wine, but if you just raise your price a little bit because it's organic, like you kind of get in this weird middle ground that's not worthwhile. So I make natural wine. There's no additives. I sell direct to consumer. My customers know me. That's what matters right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's like just the brilliance of direct to consumer, and talking about it is that you can they can verify. They could chat you up and ask questions. They can listen to this podcast, and that's what it's all about. So Yeah, shifting gears to Bitcoin, because obviously that's something you're very passionate about. We talk a lot about, the decentralized way of growing wine and low time preference. Obviously, these values are aligned. I mean, you grew up like in a rural area, value proof of work. When did the Bitcoin story happen for you? Was that before or after you jumped in to the winery? And how did that, how did you get orange pilled? How did that evolve and align your thinking with this low time preference?
I mean, it's fit pretty damn well. Like, really has like clicked, made the low time preference part of the wine click for me, and just educating myself on that. But I figured out Bitcoin after I started the winery, but the impetus to do so started around the time I was starting the winery, where I was always super into personal finance, not taking big risks, just investing in like passively investing in an index fund, Roth IRA, saving money, making sure I had a strict budget, and doing things the right way, quote unquote, in the fiat system. And then in 2019, when they started doing QT, there was basically a big shock to the system that caused bank interest rates to go down. And so my baseline was always inflation is 2%. I can offset inflation with my 2% high interest savings account. I'm good. That's zero. That's fine. It's just a little bit of money. I'm not trying to make money on my money, on that money at least. And so when that went to zero, it was kind of like, so I just have to lose money. Okay, that doesn't sit well with me. So then I started asking questions. And, I mean, it took a long time. I was living with a Bitcoiner at the time, and during the COVID crash, I remember I was working upstairs, and he comes upstairs and is like, "Oh yeah, just bought some more Bitcoin." And like that's my only memory of the COVID crash. He was just learning about it too at the time, but then I didn't really think much of it. He was my crazy libertarian friend. I was his NPC buddy. I'd probably give myself a little bit more than that, but I hadn't figured things out yet. And so he didn't really track much about me. And then when I moved back to Paonia, I moved in with my best friend from growing up here. And he's like the smartest person I know. We'd always talk about like politics, geopolitics, finance, economics. Like we have a lot of the same interests. And so little did I know he was a Bitcoiner and had been for a little while. And so obviously I respect his opinion, and we just keep talking about it more. And he just keeps saying like, you should look into it. And so while I was building this house, I just had like 6 hours of Bitcoin podcasts on a day. And like Bitcoiners talk about proof of work, and I was building my own house, learning about Bitcoin, and, didn't really have the wherewithal to be like, okay, cool, that's Bitcoin. And then, actually do something with it until the price started going up. And then I was like, oh, I got to buy some. And so I kind of had my big, like, holy crap, that's what Bitcoin is. Like, it's true scarcity, like what that actually means in the world at the first time we hit 60K. And so when we went back down, it was like, wow, this is the best opportunity I could ever have, even after like putting my life savings into Bitcoin at the top. But it was still like so thankful because I understood what Bitcoin was at that time. And so learning about that has given me, I think, a lens into low time preference that I kind of just was naturally already there. And it's given me a framework to think about that with the rest of my life. So I was naturally inclined to move that direction. Like I said, the winery fit super well. But going back to what we were talking about at the beginning is my health was in a bad spot. And I was kind of just grinding through it. I mean, I'm 25, I'm strong, I do things. But something was off. And so going into 2022, I was like, okay, if I'm going to succeed in the winery, I need to get my body right. And what's the most important things there is exercise and nutrition. And so I kind of was just interested in learning in that and didn't really think about it too much, or thought about it a lot, but like didn't really have much actionable advice. And so then where I may have met you initially at the Beef Initiative conference here, that just really opened my eyes into beef. And I started just like not going carnivore or anything, but I was like, I'm just going to try and I'm going to just, if I eat a steak for dinner and like no greens or anything, I'm just going to give that a shot. And I kind of cut out carbs and everything. And then it's like, whoa, I can think better. I can do better. I have more energy. And so all these things have just kind of fit into my low time preference framework that was natural for me, but I hadn't quite figured out.
Yeah, I think the way you say like a lens, and that's like the way to think about it. That's how I think about it. It's because like once you start down this path, you just start to question everything. It's like, oh, well, like how could I optimize my health? How could I optimize my finances? What else can I do to empower myself? Because it's all about knowledge, right? The more you learn about these things from the non-traditional sense of like education that we were brought up on, the more empowered you feel, and yeah, the more vitality you could potentially bring to your life. And I think that's really what decentralization is all about. But having that lens and connecting the dot, and then you just have this moment, you're like, oh, like I could use this principle to like all aspects of my life,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty cool.
So I grew up on this farm. My parents' goal was to eat all the food they grew, drink all the wine they make. Like we had rainwater, we had spring water, solar for electricity. All of our heating was either passive solar or one wood fireplace. Like our house was built to be off the grid. I grew up off the grid. And I kind of didn't really I wanted to rebel, you know. That was my parents' thing. I needed to find my own path. And so finding Bitcoin kind of gave me this my own lens. It was like my own me freedom to like go back into living a relatively decentralized life and providing for myself with my own, like under my own power, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's what it's all about. It's like it's so empowering to me, and I think about this, and it's like, yeah, it's taken years to develop this perspective, but then you just realize how it applies to like all avenues. And you try and infect other people with this perspective, but it can be pretty hard. And it can also be pretty like lonely on this journey as well. So I guess that's awesome that like your best friend kind of shared that perspective. I mean, the Beef Initiative, all these events. I guess how has getting more involved and putting yourself out there on social media, for example, how has that like reinforced your mindset and also like, you know, helped you realize what you're doing is like the right path and kind of empowered you even more?
Well, the thing to me is that I keep meeting awesome people that are into it. Like if I were to reach into any basket of people I know and draw someone out, the highest probability of them being smart, productive, like cool, all the things I want to find in a person and a friend is in the Bitcoin basket. And that is above anything like how I know, like I've done my research on Bitcoin. I feel good about what I know, but like in the additional factor that every every person I meet in Bitcoin is like a badass. That is just like, okay, cool. So I should just be diving into this further. Like this is the path I need to go. And so anything on social media is just like that's just me wanting to go down the path that I want to go down, and it just seems to be the best path of people to surround yourself with. That's what I've found, at least.
Yeah, I've realized that as well, and I think it's because it does take like a certain mindset to like leave the thought of like the traditional centralized system. So it's like you have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to think outside the box, and naturally, the people who do that are willing to take risks in other aspects of life for their, you know, for a good reason and for a good return on that risk.
Mm-hmm.
And that just leads to, you know, like this great group of people who, you know, business minded, entrepreneurial minded, or like just more, you know, decentralized in general, so they value all these things. And yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is like not being afraid to put yourself out there, and then yeah, valuing. I know you value heavily the in person like meetings and meetups. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say if you're someone, you know, listening, like don't be afraid to like go to your local Bitcoin meetup. They all exist, or in general, get on social media, and you don't have to like put yourself out there in a big way like Ben and I do, but you can meet some really cool people.
Yeah, it's amazing the connections. And I mean, a lot of people, it's just like some anon account. No one, like, they just lurk. There's not many followers. They're not trying to build anything, and I just meet them, and I'm like, whoa, you are like an extremely successful, badass person, and I never would have known at all. I mean, you don't put yourself out there on Twitter, and it's just like all these random Bitcoiners that I meet just tend to be so badass that I find myself just angling more towards them because that's who I want to be around. It's this, what's addicting to me is being around people that are taking responsibility for themselves, taking responsibility for everything that happens to them, whether it's good or bad, and wanting to build and help their friends. I mean, like, one of the most important things for me, and one of the beautiful things about owning a winery is all the community it builds. Like, I trade wine for a lot of my food, and when people come over, share a glass, and we have a great conversation, and that is some serious connection building. And in Bitcoin, I find that a lot of people really just appreciate the work that other people do, as well as obviously who they are interpersonally, but they really appreciate the value that you give to the world. And it's vice versa. It's pretty cool to just be around people that value other people so highly.
Yeah, it's really that accountability that's big for me as well, because it's like I always say, it's like you can control what you can control in your life, and it's like if you drive that home and really just not worry as much about things that are out of your control, and you just drive that forward, and that accountability and responsibility will take you so far in life. And I think that's really what's absent from the mainstream 99.9% of people in society. So I'm curious, you grew up in a pretty decentralized life. You obviously had these values installed in you, may have not even realized it, connected it now with Bitcoin, with health, all these things matter. You're still a young guy. How do we get more people, especially our age, men that are living the trad lifestyle, on board with any of this? Because this is something I ask most like young guys who we've interviewed, because it's a struggle, and I'm curious to hear what you think.
So one friend I've convinced to dive down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and he's also someone just like my friend to me was someone that I talk about geopolitics and economics and stuff all the time. And so, he's primed for this stuff from my lens, because I'm a economics, geopolitics, macroeconomics nerd. Like that's my, like, even before I found Bitcoin, that was my veg out time, was listening to macroeconomics podcasts. That's not for everyone. So in my convincing people, I've only been able to convince one guy who was also interested in talking about that stuff. So I've learned that me talking to people about Bitcoin, you got to have that for me to be able to convince you through words. So my goal, and what I've found to be maybe a little bit more successful, is just through my actions. Like, I want to be out there as a Bitcoiner and successful. And so if my brand is successful, I want to link Bitcoin to my brand as much as possible. Where Bitcoiners are like, oh, dude, you're linking Bitcoin to your brand because you want to graft on Bitcoin's credibility. To normies, I want to graft my brand's credibility to Bitcoin and get people to figure it out that way. And so my real thought on just how to get other people that I'm close to that live a cool lifestyle, or just everyone figured out into Bitcoin, is to just be successful as a Bitcoiner and link those two things. And it's early. I mean, I figured out Bitcoin in late 2020, and my business is still young, but all of last year and all of this year, I'll be selling my wine for Bitcoin and having a sign at my farmer's market stand that says Bitcoin preferred. And a lot of people ask. And so, I'm trying to sell them wine. I'm not going to go on this big Bitcoin diatribe, but I give them like a quick quib, whatever it is, whatever I think of in that moment. And I just want to be a touch point for people, because it takes a lot of work, a lot of humility to really dive into Bitcoin and understand it yourself. And you have to do it on your own. Like the concept of orange pilling someone, cool. My buddy, I convinced, but what I convinced is for him to do the work. He still had to do the work.
Well, that's what it's all about, right? It's like you can't subscribe to this mindset and then just like you have to do the research, the work, the knowledge. It's the same thing for like your health or whatever. It's like you want to empower someone to want to do that, dive in the rabbit hole and all the research, because that is what it means to be decentralized, is that you have the knowledge for you, because it's your situation, it's your biology, like your individual situation is going to be different. But yeah, I think the awareness we talked about on here before is like, if you want to spread, more of the Bitcoin circular economy, like at farmers markets, just go up and just ask every single vendor, do they accept Bitcoin? Because if 10, 20, 30 people do that, they might start accepting Bitcoin. And I'm curious, have you seen with other vendors at farmers markets have you seen them start to accept Bitcoin? Do you see the growth of the circular economy now at, what are you in your third year of farmers markets compared to the first one? I know they just got started. So
yeah, just getting started for the year, but yeah, definitely. 2 Bitcoiners that are at farmers markets, the ones I go to, I've got them set up to accept Bitcoin. They didn't really know how to do it first. And realistically, like, I started accepting Bitcoin last year. I didn't know how to work the Lightning Network. I didn't know how to teach working the Lightning Network. So a lot of people were like coming up to spend Bitcoin, and I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing. So I had to teach myself. But yeah, vendors see that and they're curious. Everyone's like, oh, crypto, huh? You accept crypto? I'm like, I accept Bitcoin. And they're curious just because there are people that come up and specifically buy from me because I'm a Bitcoiner, because Bitcoiners want to support each other. And they see that, and of course you want money, you want more sales. And so if you can get that with Bitcoin, great, but they don't really understand it, and there's not enough people asking about it for them to grab on. So yeah, my 2 Bitcoiner friends that are at the farmers markets I'm at, they accept Bitcoin and they have signs because I've pressured them to have signs, and every once in a while they do a sale, but it's more like, yeah, we're just passionate about Bitcoin. We just want to have it out there. But for a normal farmers market person, for them to, one, be curious about Bitcoin, they have to see me getting a lot of sales. So then they're curious about Bitcoin, and they're really curious for me to allow them, like for me to get them set up. And so then they're set up, but they don't really know how to work it. And for them to want to put in the time, effort to learn how to work it and not forget how to work it, they have to actually have people coming up and forcing them to learn and use it. Because there's a lot of people that I've been like, yeah, download this app, you're all set, good to go. They don't know how to work it, and they don't have anyone ever come up to them. So eventually that app gets deleted, and they don't care about it. So there's a couple things. Like, people say, hodl your Bitcoin, don't sell it. Yeah, for sure. Do that. You want Bitcoin in the future, obviously. But if you want Bitcoin to be accepted, if you want it to be super usable, if you want more people to learn about it and understand it and value it, the number go up that matters is their personal sales for businesses specifically. And so if you get these businesses everywhere start saying Bitcoin accepted here because people are spending Bitcoin, because people have been asking to spend Bitcoin, because they just want to make more money. I mean, that's Bitcoin's whole thing, is like, we want money that works when everyone is selfish. If all these businesses just want to make more money, if they want to act in their own interest, and in their own interest it is to accept Bitcoin because Bitcoiners spend at places that accept Bitcoin, they'll accept it. They'll have signs saying that, and then more people will want to get Bitcoin because they see it everywhere. That's all I'm trying to be, as the touch point. And so if you support Bitcoin companies, you make them stronger, and other businesses see, oh, that company's strong. What are they doing differently? Oh, they have Bitcoin? I should start doing that. So that really increases the Bitcoin circular economy, but you have to have demand for there to be supply.
Yeah, it's a positive feedback loop that's just starting to crawl.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's still pretty sparse, but yeah, the momentum can be powerful, I think. And that's why it's on the consumer side of things, because the producers they're going to be apprehensive, but if you're a consumer and you're into Bitcoin, like, just go to your farmer's market and start asking everyone if they take Bitcoin.
It's going to take a lot. They're like, yo, I just worked really hard to produce this thing, and you're asking to give me money that could devalue 50% tomorrow for this. And that's where we are with Bitcoin. You know, I mean, all of last year was tough getting people on board because the price kept going down. You know, I had all these boomers coming out to be careful, son. The price could drop 50%. And I was like, fucker, it's down 70% and I want more, you know? So it just takes a lot for people to understand it. You have to get over that hurdle of, yeah, it could devalue, it could lose value for sure. But the inherent properties, its inherent monetary policy is what gives it value in the long run. And it takes a lot of effort when people are busy doing their own thing and, you know, they just want cash flow. Why would I want this other money? I have so much other things to worry about. There has to be enough demand to push them towards that.
Yeah, and I think that's like why the beef initiative is so great, because it's like their mindset is actually aligned. Like they're very much against the system. I mean, they're a small producer, most likely. They're pretty decentralized. Like fundamentally, they will get it if they just open their mind like a little bit, but they just need that impetus to kind of push them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And I'm excited to see, because for a while it was, I mean, just being in the space for, I mean, when I first got into Bitcoin, like 2017, 2018, seriously, it's like, yeah, nobody would ever spend it. You're like, just hodl, like everything. And that's changed a lot, and I'm stoked about it. And I think that's just going to continue. And yeah, peer to peer, exchanging value for value. These are all like, this is what it's all about at the end of the day. And you're even doing that at the bartering level with your wine, which is super cool, because that doesn't get more decentralized than that.
Yeah, trading wine for stuff is really cool, and I definitely go out of my way and honestly probably buy things that I don't need just because I can trade for wine. It's fun sharing a product with someone else in a very direct way. That's like, yeah, no money involved. We're not going to worry about exact value for value. We're just going to like make sure we feel good about this. And that's some, like, I orient myself towards great human connection, and that's a pretty awesome human connection.
Do you like look back on your whole life now and like that lens and really just like gain a sense of appreciation for like how you kind of were brought up and had these values instilled in you from an early age without realizing it?
Yeah. I mean, I hated growing up here. I was bullied. I didn't fit in. It was such a big change. I had so many awesome friends in Paonia. When I say I hated growing up here, like I hated a lot. There was some serious aspects that were really hard. And obviously like some great things, but it's pretty hard moving from Austin, Texas, where I have a ton of friends and great friends, and moving to a town where you're going to be with the same kids for the next 10 years and never fit in. And so, you know, it was a hard life growing up here, but I think back to like what my life would have looked like if I had stayed in Austin.
What age did that happen?
I was 8, so second grade. And I'm so thankful to be able to move back home to a farm. And that's just like, that's my normal. Where so many people, like my dad, his life goal, just like a Bitcoiners, was to buy a farm, retire, and just do that. And I just have that. I took it for granted, didn't know what I had until I came back and really started experiencing it in my own way. And I kind of needed Bitcoin to have the lens to be able to really appreciate it. But yeah, building this house, like there's no way I want my kids to grow up in a city. I want my kids to just run down to the river. I don't see them all day. There's so many times I almost died, man. Like just in the river, like as a kid, no supervision. That's what I want for my kids, man. Like you learn how to live, you learn how to take risks, you learn how just life just by being out there and living. And, you know, you live by the rules of nature. If you fall, something hurts, you know, that sucks.
Yeah, I think Jordan Peterson says something like, let your kids do dangerous things carefully. Or
yeah. Yeah, like obviously there's, you know, I'm going down to the river behind my house. There's no one like there lurking to kidnap anyone. But it's also a raging river and I'm playing alongside it and I'm 10 years old. So stuff can happen. I don't know. It's a life it's a childhood that I really now appreciate and want to give my kids for sure.
That's awesome. I mean, that's life in a nutshell. I think for sure, same way. Like we used to go camping and hiking a lot when I was younger. Go visit Europe where my mom's from and really just be out in nature, totally disconnected from like the centralized society. And then you just kind of like take all that for granted. It's really easy to do that as a kid because you just don't conceptualize
That's your
these
life.
things.
It's just what's there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But coming full circle and then really appreciating it and, telling your parents that you really appreciate like everything that the situation that you were brought up in because so many people aren't that fortunate. Actually, the overwhelming majority are not.
Mhm.
And they're also striving for this, a lot of the people in our community. So that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, you still have a whole life ahead of you to now keep those values going to the next generation,
For
which,
sure. I'm just getting started.
yeah,
So.
is the most exciting part.
Mhm.
Well, Ben, hell yeah, this is a great conversation. Where can people find you, your wine, everything?
Yeah. So I ship wine all over the United States from
Except Utah.
peonylane.com, except Utah, Alabama, and a couple other states with some backwards laws. But most of the United States, I ship directly. That's PEONY lane.com. And I'm on Twitter at Ben Justman. And that's I'm at a local farmers market near you if you're in Western Colorado. Just come out and see me.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on and having me. It's a beautiful house, people. Paonia, Colorado is beautiful. If you're going to drink wine, just get some of the best quality all natural wine. I can attest, I don't drink very often. Like, I don't know, maybe one drink every 1 to 2 months. And I have had the wine. Definitely can confirm that the hangover, headache, noticeable differences does not exist, which is awesome. And that's just proof of the pudding. Also, the fact that like you can do it this natural way shows that how the ecosystem you're growing the grapes in is, as nature intended, and it's actually healthy. And yeah, he's a great follow on Twitter, aka the Pocket Steak Guy. I know we didn't dive into that, but very refreshing content. And yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Decentralized Radio. We'll see you next time.